They didn't accidentally build on my land, they paved roads across my grandfather's grave notes and called it progress. I'm Mason Cole, a 47-year-old structural engineer with a beat-up pickup and a deed that smells like pine sap and pipe smoke. After 3 years of grinding through overtime and alimony, I drove up to our 47 acres outside Golden, Colorado, and found Summit Crest 96 beige palaces, HOA flags fluttering like victory banners. Their Queen Victoria Langford Rolex, bright as a warning flare, looked me up and down and called me a squatter. Adverse possession, she purred like the law was a pet she'd trained. I said nothing. I counted houses. I took photos. And I waited. Because this isn't a story about outrage, it's about receipts. Stay with me, and you'll see exactly how I let them finish every last nail, then walked into court and turned a piece of paper into a wrecking ball. Before we dive in, drop your city and local time in the comments, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the twist at the end. The morning after that confrontation, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by 70 years of paper and dust. My grandfather's deed from 1972 lay open in front of me, hand-signed, embossed, notarized in a way that made it feel heavier than gold. Every tax receipt since stapled and dated, stacked neatly like a paper spine running through generations. Grandpa Elias used to say, "The land doesn't belong to us, Mason. We belong to it until someone tries to steal it." I'd always thought it was poetic nonsense. Turns out it was a warning. I opened my laptop and started pulling county records. Parcel 1184032777, still listed under my name, taxes, current, no liens, no transfer history. So how the hell did Victoria's HOA get approval to build their development permit? Summit Crest Estates had been filed using something called an adverse possession claim, citing abandonment due to non-occupancy. In Colorado, that law CRS, Section 3, 841101, requires 18 years of hostile open continuous possession. Not 3, not 5, 18. I'd been paying taxes every April, never missed a payment. The receipts were right there in my email, county confirmation numbers and all. The so-called evidence they used to claim abandonment, probably a forged affidavit or worse, a bribe disguised as a title clearance. I started a spreadsheet, dates, document IDs, contact names, every thread I could pull. Then came the shocker. The Summit Crest HOA wasn't just a community group, it was a registered nonprofit under Langford Development Holdings, Victoria's company. She'd signed the incorporation papers herself, making her both president of the HOA and the developer who sold the homes. A closed loop of fraud wrapped in suburban respectability. By noon, my anger had cooled into something sharper. I wasn't going to march into her gated fantasy again or throw punches on her sidewalk. No, I was going to dismantle her empire the same way she'd built it, paper by paper, signature by signature. I called the county recorder's office. "I need a certified copy of my parcel file," I told the clerk. Her tone shifted when she pulled it up. "Mr. Cole, are you aware there's a pending claim of adverse possession filed against this property?" "Yes, and it's fraudulent." She hesitated. Off the record, I thought so too. But the development had political backing, expedited permits, inspection waivers. "You might want to speak with an attorney before this gets uglier." I thanked her and hung up, heart pounding. Expedited permits meant somebody higher up had been paid, and if they'd done it here, they'd done it elsewhere. That night, I opened my grandfather's old leather ledger. The smell of oil and tobacco hit me like memory. Every tree cut, every fence repair, every acre logged was written in his blocky handwriting. He was methodical, the kind of man who double-counted his nails. Inside the back cover, a note I'd never noticed before. "Mason, don't let them tell you paper can't fight power. Paper built power." I scanned every page, uploaded backups to 3 drives, and made cloud copies. If someone decided to lose my records, they'd have to hack me, the county, and probably Google too. 2 days later, I drove to the county offices in Golden to request public access to the Summit Crest permit files. The clerk at the planning department gave me that bureaucratic half-smile reserved for hopeless optimists. "Those records are sealed under ongoing review," she said. "Ongoing review by who?" "By the same firm that approved them, sir." I actually laughed. That's like letting a thief investigate their own burglary. I left with nothing but confirmation that something was very, very wrong. That night, over burnt coffee and adrenaline, I called my old college friend, now a civil lawyer in Cheyenne, Eddie Brooks. "You ever heard of someone fast-tracking an adverse possession claim on taxed land?" He whistled. "Not legally. That's like trying to trademark air. You need a bulldog attorney. Someone who eats real estate fraud for breakfast. You got a name." He didn't hesitate. "Nadia Perez, Denver." won a federal injunction against a railroad company that tried the same trick in Wyoming. Cost the railroad $15 million. I called her office the next morning. The receptionist's voice was polished steel. Consultation fee is $500, Mr. Cole. 1 hour. Bring everything. I brought a banker's box so heavy my arms shook. Nadia was in her 60s, silver hair in a perfect twist, eyes like a hawk behind square glasses. She listened for 40 minutes without a word, jotting notes with a fountain pen. When I finished, she tapped the folder. You've been paying taxes continuously, yes ma'am. She smiled, barely. Then they don't have a legal leg to stand on. Adverse possession requires non-payment or abandonment. You did neither. So we shut them down. She shook her head. Not yet. If you halt construction now, they'll declare bankruptcy, claim hardship, and tie you up in appeals for years. 96 families will sue everyone, including you. It becomes legal trench warfare. I frowned. Then what do I do? Let them finish, she said calmly. Let them build their castles on sand. When it's done, we file for declaratory judgment and quiet title. You'll own the houses and the dirt under them. Fraud this deliberate. The court will call it theft, not confusion. The logic hit like cold water. Brutal, surgical, perfect. How much would this war cost, I asked. 40 to 50,000. But when we win, you'll recover damages, fees, and probably punitive penalties. You'll come out a millionaire and they'll come out bankrupt. I stared at her, and if we lose, she leaned back. You've already lost the land. But you won't. They filed an invalid claim. The only variable is how they fall quietly or spectacularly. We signed the retainer that afternoon. She gave me a yellow legal pad labeled Evidence Do Not Lose. Then she leaned forward. Mason, there's one rule. No Facebook, no emails, no bragging. Surprise is ammunition. And right now you're holding a loaded gun. Driving home, I passed the Summit Crest Gate again. The sign gleamed in the late sun, a Langford luxury development. Behind the iron, kids played on driveways that used to be deer trails. I should have felt anger. Instead, I felt resolve. Over the next weeks, I documented everything. Every visit, every truck, every worker, every cement pour. Photos with timestamps, videos from public roads, drone footage taken from legal airspace. If Victoria wanted to call me a trespasser, she'd have to redefine public. December brought snow and escalation. I received an anonymous code enforcement complaint accusing me of illegal dumping. A county inspector showed up, clipboard trembling in the cold. Mr. Cole, we got a report of debris and hazardous waste on your parcel. We hiked through the pristine white woods, well through the now paved subdivision that used to be them. Not a single scrap of garbage. The inspector sighed. Nothing here. Same story every time I check one of Langford's sites. Someone upstairs keeps trying to make life hard for the neighbors. He handed me his card. If you need a witness someday, call me. I slipped it into my wallet like a lucky coin. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. County permit records showed that Langford Development had filed their adverse possession affidavit 3 months before they even petitioned for construction approval, which meant they built before the county verified ownership. That wasn't just arrogance, it was premeditated fraud. And the financing A-shell company, Red Ridge Capital LLC, managed by Graham Langford, Victoria's husband. Classic laundering loop. They were selling homes to families who had no idea they were buying stolen dirt. By Christmas, half the houses had lights twinkling in their windows, and my phone was full of evidence. Nadia said to wait until January. They'll relax over the holidays, she said. They'll think they got away with it. That's when we strike. So I waited, and as I watched fake snowmen pop up across my land, I promised myself they could keep their lights, their wreaths, their smug smiles for now. Because in a few weeks, those same driveways would lead straight to federal court. January came bitter and gray, the kind of cold that bites through gloves and patience alike. The first Monday after New Year's, I parked just outside the Summit Crest Gate to take my usual set of photos, time-stamped, geotagged, everything by the book. Barely 2 minutes in, a black Range Rover glided up behind me, window rolling down slow. Victoria Langford. Even her sunglasses looked expensive enough to have their own mortgage. Mr. Cole, she said, voice smooth as winter glass. We've spoken before, haven't we? Yes, ma'am, I said evenly. Back in November when you called me a squatter. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. And you're back to what exactly? Taking more pictures of families, you realize that's harassment. I held up my phone, red recording light blinking. Public road, public view. Documentation for pending litigation. Her tone shifted to that brittle, fake nice, only certain people master. I think you're confused, dear. This development has full legal title. Our attorney verified everything. The land was abandoned. Abandoned property doesn't pay $6,000 a year in taxes, I said, and my bank receipts say otherwise. She blinked just once, then slipped out a cream-colored business card. Brian Kerrigan, our counsel. I'd suggest you speak to him before you continue embarrassing yourself. He's authorized to offer you a small settlement to, shall we say, make this go away. How small? $15,000, she said, tone almost sympathetic, which I might remind you is far more than abandoned land is worth. I laughed. Not loud, but enough for her to hear it. Mrs. Langford, you built $16 million of real estate on stolen ground. You might want to offer at least the cost of one of your light fixtures. Her lips twitched. You'll regret this. We have friends in every department that matters. I have a deed, I said simply. For a moment, her smile cracked. Then she snapped a photo of my license plate. Consider this a warning. Any further visits, and we'll have you arrested for trespass. She rolled the window up and sped through the gate, leaving the scent of designer perfume and diesel in the air. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Mr. Cole, this is Diane from Kerrigan Law. Mr. Kerrigan asked me to call regarding Summit Crest. I'm listening. He's offering a settlement of $15,000 in exchange for a signed quitclaim deed. We'd like to resolve this amicably before Friday. I let the silence hang long enough to make her nervous. A quitclaim deed is for when ownership is uncertain. Mine isn't. Tell Mr. Kerrigan I'll see him in court. The pause on her end spoke volumes. Very well, Mr. Cole. Good luck. Click. I stared at my phone then at the folder of documents on my desk. Good luck, no. I was going to make sure luck had nothing to do with it. That week, Nadia filed the first set of motions, requesting discovery of all development permits, construction approvals, and financing records tied to Red Ridge Capital. We knew the Langfords would try to stonewall, but Nadia's reputation alone made people nervous. Her name had weight in the Denver legal circuit, the kind that made county clerks return calls faster than they'd like to admit. On Friday, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door. For a second, I thought Victoria had made good on her threat. But the deputy, a younger guy named Torres, was polite, almost apologetic. Sir, we got a complaint about you harassing homeowners at Summit Crest. I handed him a folder. Parcel number, owner name, tax ID, and pending civil case. I haven't stepped foot beyond public easement. He skimmed the top sheet, then sighed. I figured, she's persistent, that one. Mrs. Langford. He nodded. Look off the record, half the department's tired of her. She donates, sure, but she also calls about every barking dog and unmowed lawn. Still, if she files another complaint, we have to respond. Just keep your distance. Trust me, I said. I'd rather watch her implode from afar. Torres chuckled, handed me his card. Call me if anything gets weird. It got weird the very next day. Saturday morning, an official-looking envelope appeared in my mailbox, Langford Development letterhead. Inside was a 3-page cease and desist order accusing me of trespassing, defamation, and interference with contractual relationships. The kicker, they attached a photo of my truck, parked on the county road, circled in red Sharpie with subject vehicle written in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere, Victoria's. I scanned the letter and emailed it to Nadia. Her reply came within 5 minutes. Nadia, perfect. Every threat they send is proof they knew your claim existed. Keep everything. We'll need it for fraud intent. Her calm tone was both terrifying and reassuring. For the next 2 weeks, I lived 2 lives by day, the exhausted engineer. By night, the meticulous archivist of my own defense. I photographed every letter recorded, every voicemail, logged every interaction. Then the Langfords upped their game. Mid-January, a white pickup dumped a pile of construction debris just off the property line. Shingles, insulation, splintered lumber. Within 48 hours, I got another call from code enforcement, a neighbor complaint alleging illegal dumping. Inspector Alan Meadows showed up again. Let me guess, I said before he could speak. He nodded. Anonymous tip. Same handwriting as last time, if you ask me. We walked the site together. He took photos, measured distances, even checked GPS coordinates. This debris isn't yours. It's from house lot 37. See that cut of stucco? Summit Crest uses that exact blend. So what happens now? He shrugged. If I file this right, it goes to county legal. They'll start seeing a pattern. I grinned. That's all I need. By February, I had more than enough for a pattern: threats, false complaints, intimidation, and at least one bribed inspector, according to a whistleblower Nadia found. Still, we held back. Timing mattered more than emotion. Victoria, however, had no patience. The next week, she escalated to social warfare. Someone guess who posted on a local Facebook group alert stalker targeting Summit Crest families, middle-aged man named Mason Cole taking photos of children claiming to own our neighborhood. Police notified. Stay safe. Within hours, it had 400 shares and a comment section that burned like kerosene. My name, my truck, even my license plate were plastered online with captions like, "Watch for this creep." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't been angry before. Now I was livid. I called Nadia immediately. "They're calling me a predator online." "Then we document it," she said calmly. "Every share, every comment, every tag, screenshots, timestamps, URLs. That's defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress." "But my job," she cut me off. "I told you this would get dirty." That's how people like her operate. They weaponize reputation because it's cheaper than truth. She was right. 2 days later, my boss at the engineering firm called me into his office. "Mason, I got a call from a client. They saw some stuff online." He sighed. "Take 2 weeks off with pay. Let this blow over, as if lies evaporated." I drove home that night with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. The neighborhood lights blurred through the windshield, glowing like the very houses that had stolen my peace. I sat in my driveway watching the snow fall and thinking about my grandfather, how he'd faced loggers and speculators who tried to undercut him back in the 70s. He hadn't backed down, neither would I. The next morning, I woke up to graffiti on my garage door, "Pervert" in red spray paint. The police report went nowhere. The responding officer shrugged. "Could have been a teenager, sir. Hard to prove who did it, but I knew." Everyone did. Victoria's smear campaign was working. My neighbors avoided me. A grocery cashier wouldn't meet my eyes. Even my daughter Emma called crying, "Dad, what's happening? Are you really being investigated?" I explained everything, voice shaking, not from fear but exhaustion. She listened quietly, then said, "Then make them pay, Dad. Don't stop." So I didn't. By the end of that brutal January, Nadia filed the full civil suit, Cole versus Langford Development Holdings Summit Crest, HOA, and Red Ridge Capital, LLC. We requested declaratory judgment, quiet title damages, attorney's fees, and injunctive relief. That was the moment the tide turned. Not in headlines yet, not in money, but in momentum. Because for the first time, Victoria wasn't dictating the game. I was. And when I mailed that stamped court notice to her office, I imagined her manicured hands trembling as she opened it. For once, the Queen of Summit Crest would realize she'd built her empire on stolen ground, and the man she called a squatter just served her eviction notice from hell. When the lawsuit finally hit the docket, I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hunted. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected another anonymous threat, another whisper in the dark from Victoria's army of lawyers and HOA loyalists. But Nadia Perez, my so-called giant killer, was calm as a mountain lake. She called me into her Denver office the next morning. It sat on the top floor of a stone building downtown, all old brass railings and glass doors that made you feel like you were walking into a courtroom even before you saw the judge. Her desk was clean except for 2 things, a leather-bound case file labeled Cole v. Langford, and a cup of black coffee she never seemed to finish. "Sit," she said. "You did everything right. Now it's my turn." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were copies of every letter, photo, and complaint I'd collected. She'd added her own tabs, color-coded like a battlefield map. "I'm filing a motion for a temporary injunction to stop any further home sales," she explained. "If we win, construction freezes until ownership is settled. But that's not the real goal." "What's the real goal, Leverage?" she said, smiling faintly. "I want to box them in before they realize they're standing on quicksand." I nodded, pretending I wasn't terrified. Then she handed me another sheet of paper, a handwritten checklist. "From now on," she said, "this is your religion. Log every interaction. No contact with HOA board or residents. Keep your phone camera rolling at every visit. Never react emotionally, even when provoked. And most importantly, no social media. Victoria's already trying to bait you," Nadia continued. "She'll twist anything you say into harassment. Stay silent. Let them keep building their own gallows." It was ruthless advice, but I trusted her completely. That night, I sat on my couch staring at the map of Summit Crest. 96 homes in neat, symmetrical rows, each one a monument to someone's mortgage and someone else's fraud. It wasn't the families I was angry at, it was the arrogance. The way Victoria had smirked like laws were optional for people who donated to the right sheriff's fund. By the following week, Nadia had subpoenaed the county for every permit file and construction record related to the development. The results came back like confetti from a crime scene, conflicting lot maps, duplicated survey stamps, and signatures from a county engineer who'd retired 3 years earlier. When I showed up at her office to review the documents, she looked genuinely delighted. "This is better than I hoped," she said. "These permits are forged, sloppy too. Whoever did this used an outdated template from 2017. Can we prove it?" "Oh, we can prove it," she said. "And once we do, they're done. The county's not going to want their fingerprints on this mess either. We're turning civil fraud into criminal exposure." That's when she explained her real plan. We wouldn't just sue for damages. We'd add civil theft under Colorado Statute 184405 because fraudulently selling someone else's land wasn't just shady, it was theft. That meant triple damages and mandatory attorney's fees. In short, if the Langfords lost, they'd owe me enough to rebuild the entire forest they bulldozed and then some. I left her office with a strange sense of peace. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. 2 days later, Victoria tried again. I came home to find an envelope taped to my front door. Inside, another cease and desist letter, this time threatening criminal prosecution for recording residents without consent. She'd highlighted a line from Colorado's wiretapping law, half right, half wrong, and signed it with her perfect cursive flourish. I laughed out loud. She'd just admitted the footage existed and that she knew I was filming from a public road. It was like watching someone light their own matchbook in slow motion. I scanned the document, emailed it to Nadia, and added a note. "Victoria's trying to weaponize wiretapping statutes. Might be useful later." Her reply came 10 minutes later. "She's desperate. Keep collecting." That weekend, I drove to Summit Crest one last time before the snow got too deep. I parked far enough to stay invisible, but close enough to see the activity. Workers were finishing roofs, painting fences, prepping the clubhouse foundation. I could almost admire the efficiency if it hadn't been built on stolen soil. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. A massive stone sign at the entrance, freshly unveiled Summit Crest, a Langford Legacy Community Legacy. The word burned like acid. My grandfather's land, his ledger, his trees, all reduced to a vanity project for people who believed legacy was something you bought with a donation. I snapped photos until my fingers went numb, then drove straight to the post office and mailed a copy of every image to my lawyer by certified mail. Physical evidence time-stamped and verified. 2 days later, Nadia called. Her voice was steady, but her words came clipped, controlled. "The county's internal auditor just contacted me. Someone filed a complaint against you with the environmental board claiming you've been dumping construction waste into a protected stream." I almost dropped my phone. "What stream?" "The creek that used to run through my property doesn't even exist anymore. They filled it with concrete." "That's what I told him," she said. "He's sending an investigator, but don't worry. It's a bluff. They're trying to bury you under paperwork." "So what do? We let them," she said. "Every false report they file becomes part of our case. I want a pattern of malicious intent so clear even a rookie prosecutor could see it." And so I waited. Weeks crawled by, each one heavier than the last. I lost 10 pounds, half my sleep, and most of my faith in humanity. Yet amid the exhaustion, a new kind of focus took root. I'd stopped reacting to their chaos. I was documenting it. By late February, the construction site looked almost finished. Families moved in. Kids played basketball in driveways that hadn't existed 6 months earlier. HOA newsletters bragged about record-breaking development speed. I saved every PDF, every post, every smug comment from Victoria about transforming wilderness into community. And then, just as Nadia predicted, the Langfords made their fatal error. On March 3rd, they filed an official HOA complaint, with the county accusing me of continued interference and demanding law enforcement seize my recording equipment. The attached evidence, photos of my truck from inside their gated property, meaning someone had taken them after the HOA acknowledged the land was under dispute. When I read that, I smiled for the first time in months. They just admitted knowledge of the ownership conflict while continuing to sell houses. That turned negligence into willful fraud. I forwarded it to Nadia. Her response: "They just buried themselves. We're filing the injunction Monday." That weekend, I didn't sleep. Not because of fear this time, but anticipation. I cleaned my house, organized my files, polished my grandfather's brass compass, and laid the deed on the kitchen table one more time. The paper had yellowed at the edges, but the ink was still bold: Elias Cole, 47.2 acres, Jefferson County, Colorado. I whispered to the empty room they built on the wrong man's dirt. Monday morning, Nadia filed the injunction in federal court. And as I drove past the Summit Crest gate for what I promised myself would be the last time I saw Victoria standing beside that stone sign, giving a tour to some new potential buyers, our eyes met across the snow. She smiled like she'd already won. I smiled back because she had no idea the storm that was about to hit her. The week after Nadia filed the injunction felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. For months, I'd been collecting evidence like a paranoid archivist, but now the machine was in motion, federal case number assigned court date pending the Langfords officially named defendants. For the first time, the game board wasn't theirs. Except, of course, people like Victoria never fold quietly. It started with whispers. My neighbor Carol, who'd lived 2 doors down from me for 10 years, knocked on my door one morning, cheeks flushed. "Mason, honey." She said, "You didn't hear this from me, but someone from the HOA came by asking about your mental stability." I blinked. "What say you've been acting erratic? Taking photos of children screaming about property lines. They asked if I'd ever seen you lose control." I felt my stomach twist. "Did you tell them anything?" She smiled grimly. "I told them the only time I've seen you lose control is when your snowblower jams. But you might want to keep an eye out, they're building a story." She wasn't wrong. Within days, a manila envelope appeared in my mailbox, a notice of community conduct concern signed by the Summit Crest Homeowners Association. The letter accused me of creating a hostile environment, harassing residents, and impeding emergency vehicle access by loitering near the entrance. Loitering on a county road. I scanned the document and sent it to Nadia with a 2-word message. "They're escalating." She called 5 minutes later. "Good. Let them. Every fake complaint is a bullet in our gun. Just don't engage. Even if they start talking to my neighbors, especially then," she said. "The moment you react, they'll paint you as unstable. And unstable plaintiffs lose credibility in front of judges." So, I stayed quiet. But silence has its cost. 2 days later, I found tire tracks cutting across the edge of my property, deep gouges in the thawing dirt. When I checked my trail camera, I saw a white truck backing in, dumping old lumber, then driving off. License plate blurry, but I recognized the company logo, Langford Construction LLC. I called the county. The same Inspector Alan Meadows met me that afternoon. "Mr. Cole, you again," he said, shaking his head. "You must be living rent-free in somebody's mind." He walked the site, snapping pictures. "Same debris pattern as before. This isn't random dumping, it's staged. And whoever did it wants you fined for environmental violation. Can you testify to that?" He grinned. "Already planning to." That night I wrote everything down in my evidence log, then sat at my kitchen table staring at the growing stack of manila folders. It looked less like paperwork and more like a war archive. By March's end, Summit Crest was officially complete. 96 homes sold, families, moved-in lawns manicured to HOA perfection. They were hosting barbecues, now celebrations of their beautiful community. I watched from the roadside one afternoon as Victoria handed out champagne flutes to new homeowners, her laughter echoing across what used to be my forest. She had no idea she was standing on a trap built from her own arrogance. Meanwhile, Nadia was relentless. She filed discovery motions for every permit, contract, and loan related to the development. When the Langfords' lawyers tried to stall, she subpoenaed the county directly. 2 weeks later, we struck gold. The building permit for Summit Crest bore the signature of David Knox, a county engineer who had retired 3 years before the application was filed. Nadia called me that night, practically vibrating with energy. "Forgery, Mason. Textbook forgery. This isn't just a civil case anymore, this is criminal. You think the county will act? Not yet. But when we present this to the judge, she'll have no choice but to refer it for prosecution." Her confidence was intoxicating. But the Langfords weren't done. The following Friday, I woke to find my truck keyed, deep scratches down both sides, and a note tucked under the wiper: "Drop the case or else." No signature, just those words in neat block letters. I called Torres, the deputy who'd warned me earlier. He came within an hour, looked at the truck, and sighed. Same handwriting as some of the anonymous complaints we've seen. "I can't prove it's her, but..." He let the sentence die. I stared at the note. "You know what's funny, officer? She still thinks I scare easy." He chuckled. "Then keep scaring her back with paperwork." That weekend, Nadia organized what she called Phase 2. We met in her office Sunday morning. The conference table was covered in color-coded files, blue for the county, red for financial, yellow for witness statements. "We're going after intent now," she said. "Not just that they built illegally, but that they knew it." She pulled out a printout of an email chain between Red Ridge Capital Graham's investment firm and a Langford project manager. The subject line read, "Risk Assessment, Coal Parcel." In one email, Graham wrote, Elias Cole's grandson has been paying taxes since 2019. Adverse possession may not hold. Proceed quickly before any claim is challenged. There it was, proof. They knew. Nadia leaned back, smiling like a chess player who'd just cornered the king. Once the judge reads this, the injunction becomes a formality. The question won't be whether you get your land back, it'll be how much extra they pay for damages. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Months of frustration, anger, exhaustion, all crystallized into a single thought: Grandpa was right. Keep every receipt. But victory has its price. That night, my daughter Emma called, voice trembling. Dad, someone posted about you again. A fake account. Said you're suing families just to get rich. People are commenting awful stuff. My hands clenched around the phone. You stay off that page, honey. Let me handle it. She hesitated. But Dad, what if they come after me? I swallowed hard. Then they'll have to go through me first. After we hung up, I sat alone in the dark for a long time. The quiet was heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. 2 mornings later, I received an email from Nadia, marked urgent. Subject, they blinked. Langford's attorney just reached out for settlement discussions. That means they're scared. But we're not settling, not yet. I want discovery finished. When we move decisively. Her strategy was clear: make them bleed in filings before we ever set foot in court. By mid-April, we had a date preliminary hearing, May 10th. I drove past Summit Crest that night, camera rolling one last time. The streetlights shimmered over perfect lawns and matching mailboxes. A boy pedaled a bike down what used to be a deer trail. Somewhere inside, people were probably watching TV, oblivious that their dream neighborhood was sitting on stolen ground. Part of me pitied them. The rest of me was already picturing Victoria on a witness stand. When I got home, I found another letter in the mailbox. This one wasn't threatening, it was desperate. Mr. Cole, we didn't know about any of this. We bought our home here last fall. If the lawsuit succeeds, will we lose everything? Please, we have 2 kids. We just want to do what's right. Sarah and Daniel Chen, 211 Aspen Loop, asterisk. I read it 3 times. They weren't the enemy. They were collateral good people caught in the blast radius of Victoria's greed. That's when I made a quiet promise to myself. If we won, I wouldn't destroy them to punish her. I'd find a way to make it right. The next morning, I emailed Nadia a copy of the letter. She wrote back, keep it. You'll want this later when we rebuild your reputation, not just your land. May 10th was coming fast. And as I gathered my documents and checked my watch, one truth settled deep in my bones. This wasn't just about acres and deeds anymore. It was about teaching people like Victoria that power without consequence is temporary. Because paper, real paper signed and sealed, still beats arrogance every single time. The morning of May 10th felt colder than usual, though the forecast said 70 degrees. Maybe it was nerves, or maybe it was knowing that months of quiet war were about to boil over in a single courtroom. I drove to Denver with the windows cracked just enough to smell the pine air off the highway, trying to steady my breathing. When I arrived, Nadia was already waiting outside the federal courthouse, coffee in hand, unflappable as always. You ready to see a queen lose her crown? She asked. Born ready, I said, though. My voice betrayed the tremor in my gut. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, sterile and fluorescent, with rows of benches that smelled faintly of furniture polish. At the defense table sat Victoria and her husband Graham, both dressed like they were attending a country club gala instead of a pretrial hearing. Their lawyer Kerrigan looked slick and smug, the kind of man who thought his tie could outwit the law. When the clerk called our case, Judge Ortega, a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense, took her seat. Nadia rose first. Her words were crisp, precise, every syllable sharpened to a blade. Your Honor, she began, this is not a case of confusion or clerical error. This is a case of calculated theft, a developer who knowingly built 96 homes on property that was never theirs. My client has paid property taxes continuously since 2019. The defendants filed a fraudulent adverse possession claim, forged permits signed by a retired engineer, and sold millions in homes built on stolen land. We ask for an injunction halting any further sale or occupancy until rightful ownership is restored. Kerrigan smirked. Your Honor, opposing counsel is dramatizing a paperwork misunderstanding. The land in question was abandoned, as evidenced by... The judge raised a hand. Was property tax paid? Kerrigan hesitated. Well, yes, but then it wasn't abandoned, she said flatly. Next. For the first time, Victoria's perfect posture faltered. She leaned toward Kerrigan, whispering something sharp enough to make him flinch. Nadia waited, patient as gravity. When Kerrigan finished stumbling through his defense, she dropped the bomb, an enlarged printout of Graham's risk assessment email. The one that spelled out everything they knew: I owned the property, they planned to file fast, sell faster, and bury me in litigation. The room went silent. Judge Ortega read it twice, then looked over her glasses. Mr. Langford, did you write this? Graham swallowed. It was internal discussion, hypothetical. She slammed her gavel once. Answer the question. Yes. Then it's not hypothetical. The gavel came down again harder. Temporary injunction granted. All property transfers, sales, and HOA operations related to Summit Crest are suspended pending resolution. Defendants are ordered to cease communications with residents regarding ownership claims. Mr. Cole retains full access to his parcel, pending final judgment. It was over in less than 30 minutes. The Langfords had built for a year, and in half an hour it all froze solid. Outside the courthouse, the press waited like vultures. Nadia brushed past them, whispering, no comments. Yet, she turned to me once we reached her car. Congratulations, Mason. You just own 96 luxury homes. Legally, at least for now. I wanted to laugh, but the weight of it crushed the humor out of me. And what about the families living there? That's phase 3, she said. First, we make sure the HOA collapses. Then we talk restitution. The Langfords must have known they were cornered because within a week, the smear campaign reignited. Fake news articles started popping up on local blogs, anonymous posts accusing me of being a con artist who scammed taxpayers. One headline read, "Engineer turns lawsuit into cash grab." Another claimed I'd threatened families with eviction. Each post traced back to shell accounts created within the same 48-hour window. Nadia wasn't surprised. It's psychological warfare, she said. They can't win in court, so they're trying to win in perception. Ignore it. Every defamation counts as evidence of malice. Ignoring it was easier said than done. I couldn't go grocery shopping without hearing whispers. My clients dropped me from contracts, pending clarity. Even my gym locker got tagged with thief. But something shifted after week 2. Local news started connecting the dots. Kendra Blake from Channel 7, an investigative reporter with a reputation for torching corrupt developers, aired a segment titled The HOA That Built on Stolen Ground. It laid everything bare: the forged permits, the fake engineer signature, the Langfords' political donations, and the injunction that froze their empire. Within 24 hours, Summit Crest's Facebook group went from celebrating spring gardening tips to full-blown panic. Wait, do we actually own our homes? One resident posted. Should we stop paying HOA dues? Wrote another. And my favorite, does anyone have Victoria's number? She's not answering. They were starting to realize the Queen had left the castle. Meanwhile, Nadia was busy prepping for the next move depositions. We're calling everyone, she said. Developers, surveyors, even the notary who stamped that fake deed. Someone's gonna crack. And crack they did. The first to fold was the junior surveyor who'd signed off on the lot divisions. He admitted under oath that he'd been told to reuse templates from a previous project to save time. When asked who gave the order, he said Graham Langford. That was all Nadia needed. The fraud wasn't just circumstantial anymore. It was documented, confessed, undeniable. But Victoria wasn't done playing villain. 3 days after the deposition, I came home to find my mailbox ripped open and my trash cans overturned. Inside one, a single printed note: "You should have taken the money." I called Torres again. He came by weary but sympathetic. "Mr. Cole, we can file a report but without prints, I know," I said. "Just document it." He jotted notes, then added, "Off the record, the DA's office is sniffing around. Word is the judge forwarded your case for review." That was the first moment I realized this might end bigger than I imagined. Days blurred into weeks as we waited for the next hearing. Every morning I'd wake to new threats, emails, calls, even a fake eviction notice taped to my door. But beneath all the noise, I could feel the Langfords crumbling. On June 3rd, Nadia called with the news I'd been waiting for. "The county attorney's office just referred your case to the U.S. attorney. They're opening a criminal fraud investigation into Langford Development in Red Ridge Capital. This is officially federal now." I sat down hard. "Federal, as in prison time federal." She grinned. "As in racketeering federal. You can't buy your way out of that." For the first time since this nightmare began, I laughed until my chest hurt. Still, one thing gnawed at me: the residents. 96 families who'd bought homes in good faith, now trapped in limbo. I'd been called everything from a hero to a monster, depending on which side of the HOA fence people stood on. But I didn't want their homes. I just wanted my grandfather's name cleared. So I asked Nadia, what happens if we win everything? The land, the damages, the houses. She paused. "Legally, you'd own it all. But morally, that's up to you." That night I stood on the ridge overlooking Summit Crest. The houses glowed under the setting sun, golden and hollow. Somewhere in that grid of asphalt and ambition, children were laughing. They didn't know they were playing on stolen earth. I whispered to the wind, "Don't worry, Grandpa. I'll fix this. All of it." I didn't know how yet, but I would. Because I wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for redemption. July rolled in hot and dry, and the air itself felt electric. Every gust of wind carried the smell of dust and tension. The federal trial for Cole versus Langford development was officially set for July 18th. By then, every local news outlet from Denver to Colorado Springs had plastered the story across their headlines. My face sunburned, tired, half-smiling in some poorly lit courthouse photo, had become the reluctant poster for property rights. But fame wasn't power. Power was the binder Nadia carried into court packed with every shred of proof. We'd gathered the deed, the tax receipts, the forged permits, and her masterpiece, the email chain that would end the Langfords' empire. We arrived early that morning, both of us dressed in navy suits that looked borrowed from confidence itself. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered half-holding signs reading "Protect Homeowners," half-shouting "Justice for Cole." It was chaos, but it meant people were paying attention. When we stepped inside, I spotted them instantly. Victoria wrapped in cream silk and arrogance, pretending not to see me. Her husband Graham beside her, jaw tight, pretending not to sweat. Their new lawyer, a polished corporate shark named Diane Kelso, stood between them like she was guarding royalty. At exactly 9 a.m., Judge Ortega entered. The courtroom quieted. Nadia stood first for the opening statement. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is about theft in daylight. The defendants didn't sneak into a warehouse or forge a check. They built a neighborhood on someone else's land and called it progress. They did it knowingly, arrogantly, and with full expectation that money would protect them from consequence. But law is not a luxury, and land is not a suggestion." Her words rang like a hymn. Even the court reporter paused for half a heartbeat as if absorbing it. Then Diane rose. "Your Honor, this case is built on misunderstanding and emotion. The Langfords were misled by a title company that—" "Spare me the judge," interrupted. "We'll get to the evidence." Diane's mask cracked just slightly. Nadia's first witness was the junior surveyor who had confessed to copying signatures. He looked terrified on the stand, wringing his hands. "Miss Daly," Nadia said, voice gentle, "who instructed you to reuse documents from 2017, Mr. Langford," he said without hesitation. "Graham Langford." He said no one would notice. The courtroom rippled with whispers. Then came Alan Meadows, the code enforcement inspector. "In your professional opinion," Nadia asked, "were the environmental complaints against my client legitimate?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am. They were weaponized, filed right before major construction deadlines to bury Mr. Said. Cole in red tape. By whom the Summit Crest HOA, signed by Victoria Langford." For the first time all morning, Victoria spoke. "That's a lie," she snapped. Judge Ortega's gavel slammed once. "Mrs. Langford, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt." The room fell silent again. After lunch break, it was my turn. I took the stand, hands sweating against the wood railing. Nadia's questions were straightforward. "Mr. Cole, did you ever abandon your property?" "No." "Did you pay property taxes every year since inheriting it?" "Yes." "Did you authorize the defendants to build Summit Crest on your land?" "Absolutely not." Then came the final question. "When you discovered 96 homes built where your grandfather's forest used to be, what did you feel?" I swallowed hard. Shock, then anger, then I paused. Resolve. Because this wasn't just about me. My grandfather taught me that land carries memory, and I wasn't going to let greed erase his. I caught Victoria watching me. Her eyes burned not guilt, just fury that someone like me had dared to fight back. Then Nadia presented the final exhibit, the internal risk assessment email. She read it aloud, voice steady. "Elias Cole's grandson has been paying taxes since 2019. Adverse possession may not hold. Proceed quickly before any claim is challenged. Worst case, settle cheap or bury him in costs." The air in the room shifted. It wasn't just evidence, it was confession. Judge Ortega looked over her glasses. "Mr. Langford, is this your email?" Graham hesitated, his lawyer whispering frantically. "Your Honor, yes or no?" "Yes." "Then that's all I need." She leaned back, tapping her pen. "We'll reconvene tomorrow for closing statements." As we left, Nadia whispered, "They're finished." But she was wrong. Finished people don't lash out. That night, while I was home reviewing documents, a loud thud shook my porch. I ran outside to find a brick shattered on the steps. Taped to it was a note, "Drop the case or drop dead." I called Torres. Within an hour, his patrol car lights washed my front yard in blue. He took photos, bagged the note, and cursed under his breath. "This is beyond harassment now, Mason. You need security." I shook my head. "I'll be fine," he frowned. "You're the most stubborn man in Colorado. You know that Grandpa would have wanted it that way." The next morning, courtroom security was doubled. Nadia insisted I sit behind her during closing arguments. When she rose to deliver them, she didn't just summarize the facts, she dismantled the myth of power. "Your Honor," she said, "we live in a country built on deeds, not donations. The defendants thought they could pave over someone's history and call it progress. But justice doesn't care about Rolexes or campaign checks. Justice cares about paper authentic, signed, preserved, the kind that tells the truth even when people lie." Diane's closing was defensive, emotional, full of empty words like oversight and good faith. The judge's expression never changed. At 3:42 p.m., she ruled. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff Mason Cole. The defendant's actions constitute fraudulent conveyance, forgery, and willful trespass. The plaintiff retains full ownership of the 47.2 acres known as the Summit Crest subdivision. Damages are awarded in the amount of $4.8 million plus attorney's fees. Furthermore, this court refers the matter to the U.S. Attorney for potential criminal charges." The gavel struck. I didn't move. Couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard. Beside me, Nadia grinned. "You did it, Mason. You just made legal history." But as we left the courthouse, the victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like release. Like exhaling after years of holding my breath. Reporters swarmed the steps. One shouted, "Mr. Cole, what will you do with 96 homes?" I stopped, looked straight into the camera and said, "Something my grandfather would be proud of." That night, the verdict went viral. News anchors called it the land that fought back. Property lawyers called it a precedent. HOA forums called it a warning. Victoria and Graham's empire collapsed overnight. Their investors pulled funding. Red Ridge Capital filed for bankruptcy, and by morning, every house sale in Summit Crest was frozen pending restitution. But amid all the celebration, I couldn't shake the image of the Chen family's letter. I thought of the kids riding bikes down streets that had once been deer trails. They didn't deserve to pay for someone else's greed. So while the world cheered my win, I sat at my kitchen table drafting something new, an idea that wasn't about revenge but repair, a trust, a nonprofit, something that could turn all this destruction into meaning. Because the fight was over, but the rebuilding had only just begun. The morning after the verdict, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. My inbox was flooded, reporters, law professors, strangers from across the country sending messages that all said the same thing: "You gave us hope." But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt tired, bone-deep, soul-tired. I sat on my porch with a cup of black coffee looking out at the land that had started this whole war. The ridgeline was still scarred, mud trails, the stumps of trees cut for roads, the faint hum of generators left behind when construction halted. It wasn't peaceful yet. It was wounded, and so was I. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the message preview. "I know what the Langfords did before Summit Crest," I answered. The voice on the other end was rough, maybe mid-50 seconds, with that chain smoker rasp of someone who'd worked too many job sites. Name's Dennis O'Leary. Used to be project manager for Langford Development back in 2018. Aspen Ridge Estates ring a bell. I didn't. "They pulled the same trick there," Dennis said. "Built half a resort on private mining land. Settled it quiet before it hit the news. I still got the internal emails they made me delete." "You want copies?" "Yes," I said before he even finished. "I'll send them." "But you didn't hear my name." Got it. 2 hours later, Nadia called me from her office, voice low but charged. "I just got a drop file from someone named Dennis O. You know him," I smiled. "You could say that." She laughed a short, delighted sound. "Mason, it's Christmas in July. The Aspen Ridge case shows a pattern of fraud, same signatures, same fake engineer, same language in their filings. This isn't just a civil problem anymore. This is racketeering. I'm filing RICO." That word hit like thunder. RICO, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The law built to crush mobsters, now pointed squarely at Victoria and Graham Langford. "This is going federal, Nadia continued. "Once we add the Aspen evidence, the U.S. Attorney's Office will have to act. You might be done fighting, but their nightmare's just beginning." For the first time in a year, I laughed, not out of spite, but relief. Justice wasn't coming. It was already here wearing steel shoes. That night, Channel 7 Denver aired their follow-up From Land Theft to Criminal Enterprise, The Langford Scandal Grows. The segment featured me sitting under my porch light talking about my grandfather, about what land meant to working people. Your grandfather's note said, "Don't let them take what's yours," reporter Kendra Blake asked. What would he say now? I thought for a second. He'd say, "Don't just win, make it matter." That quote exploded online. Thousands of shares, comments, even local politicians tweeting about accountability in property law. I was getting tagged in videos, interviews, podcast invitations, people calling me the man who beat the HOA machine, but notoriety cuts both ways. 3 nights later, my security camera caught a black SUV idling at the edge of my driveway. 2 silhouettes sat inside. No license plate visible. They didn't move for 20 minutes, then drove off. The next morning, Torres showed up. "Mason, you're on some people's list now. The Langfords have money, but not enough to buy silence anymore. You might want to stay somewhere else till the dust settles." "I'm not hiding," I said. "This is my land." He sighed. "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." By midweek, Nadia called again. The DOJ just confirmed they're investigating Red Ridge Capital. Federal subpoenas out for financials, bank transfers, campaign donations. Graham's panicking. His lawyer reached out for a settlement. "What kind of settlement? 10 million, she said. "And your silence?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "You told him no, right, please," Nadia said dryly. "I told him to frame the offer, because that's the last check he'll ever sign as a free man." The next day, the Langfords' panic became public. Their luxury cars disappeared from the Summit Crest Clubhouse parking lot. Contractors stopped answering their calls. Red Ridge's website went offline. By Friday, federal agents raided their offices in downtown Denver. I saw it on live TV. Boxes of files carried out, computers wrapped in plastic, reporters shouting questions as Graham was led past them in handcuffs. Victoria wasn't there, rumor said. She'd fled to California to stay with her sister. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, I just felt quiet. Like standing in the aftermath of a thunderstorm, air clean but eerily still. That weekend, I drove through Summit Crest for the first time without hiding. The roads were empty. The HOA sign had been torn down, leaving a stone base like a gravestone. As I passed the Chen's house, the family who'd written me that letter, Sarah, was outside watering her flowers. She saw my truck, hesitated, then waved. I parked, stepped out. "You got a minute," she nodded cautiously. "I just wanted to say you don't need to worry," I told her. "The court's decision means you keep your home. All of you do. No one's losing anything." Her eyes filled. "You're serious?" "Completely. I've already talked to Nadia. We're forming a community trust. The land will stay yours and every other homeowner's. No more HOA, no more Langfords." She covered her mouth. "I don't even know what to say." "Just pay it forward," I said. "Build something better than they did." The next morning, I met with Nadia to finalize the trust paperwork. "You really want to give up ownership?" she asked. I shrugged. I never wanted to own people's homes. I just wanted my grandfather's name back. Now I want these families to have what he fought for: stability. She smiled softly. "You realize you're walking away from $16 million. Money's replaceable," I said. "Legacy isn't." She stared for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let's make it official." 2 weeks later, the Denver Post ran a front-page story: "Man wins back his land, then gives it away." The article detailed how I'd created the Elias Cole Community Trust, transferring ownership of all 96 Summit Crest properties to a nonprofit managed by the residents themselves. Every dollar from remaining mortgage payments would go into maintaining infrastructure, repairing environmental damage, and funding scholarships for local students, studying forestry, civil engineering, and law. The comment section was a flood of disbelief and gratitude. People were calling it the first HOA worth joining. But for me, the real payoff came quietly. One evening I received a letter in the mail, no return address, just a typed note. "Mr. Cole, I was one of the contractors. The Langfords stiffed on another job years ago. Watching you take them down gave me closure I didn't know I needed. I just wanted to say thank you for fighting the way most of us couldn't. P.S. If you ever need your cabin roof redone, it's on the house." I laughed so hard I cried. That same night, my daughter Emma drove up from Fort Collins. We sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and violet. So she said, "What's next for the hero of Colorado hero, huh?" I chuckled. "Maybe I'll finally rebuild Grandpa's cabin, or start a foundation, or just sit here for a while." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "He'd be proud of you, you know." I looked out at the land, the faint outlines of the homes glinting in the distance. "Yeah," I whispered. But I'm proud of him, too. He raised me to keep my receipts. The wind shifted through the pines, carrying the faint smell of sap and rain. For the first time in years, the land felt alive again, free of fences, free of arrogance, free of fear. And for the first time, so did I. By autumn, the mountain air had turned crisp again, clear, sharp, and almost sweet. The kind of air that makes you feel like everything dirty in the world can eventually wash clean. The Langfords were gone, but their shadow lingered. The fraud, the fear, the bureaucracy, they all left a stain deeper than any concrete foundation. I thought my part was over, but the law doesn't end just because you won. It lingers, tying up loose ends like vines that refuse to stop growing. It started with a phone call from Nadia. Her tone was professional, but I caught the excitement underneath. "You might want to sit down," she said. "I'm on the porch. That count," she laughed softly. The Department of Justice just issued formal indictments against Graham and Victoria Langford. Wire fraud, real estate fraud, RICO conspiracy. 23 counts total. I blinked, letting that sink in. "So this is it. This is it," she said. "They're facing up to 20 years. Maybe more if they don't cooperate. The U.S. attorney called your case a textbook example of white-collar land theft." 20 years, I murmured. "Guess karma knows how to use a gavel." "And that's not all," Nadia added. "The whistleblower Dennis O'Leary, the one from Aspen Ridge, he's testifying under immunity. He's got receipts that make your case look like the warm-up act. Offshore accounts, forged notarizations, fake property swaps. These people weren't just crooked Mason. They were industrial-grade criminals." I leaned back in my chair, the old wood creaking beneath me. "Guess I should send him a thank you card. You should probably buy him dinner instead," she said. "He might have just saved the next 100 homeowners from getting bulldozed." After that call, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something heavier, final. Like the last nail had finally been driven into a coffin no one would dare open again. But the world doesn't pause for justice. Within days, journalists swarmed the story. The fall of the Langfords, Colorado's HOA empire crumbles. News anchors loved the drama, the wealthy couple in handcuffs, the middle-class engineer with the old deed, the courthouse photo that had already become a meme, me holding the yellow document like Excalibur. I avoided interviews, but one day a crew from Channel 9 showed up anyway. The reporter Patricia Hughes had been one of the few who treated me fairly from the start. She asked, "Can we do a follow-up? The human side of the story, what happens after victory?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but we do it my way." They filmed me walking through the woods behind my cabin, the trees whispering like they were listening. Patricia asked about the trust, about giving away what I'd fought for. I said people think revenge feels good, but real peace, that comes from fixing what was broken. The interview aired that night, and within 24 hours, donations poured into the Elias Cole Community Trust. A retired engineer in Oregon sent $5,000. A teacher from Wisconsin wrote a letter saying she'd used my story to teach her civics class about property rights. Even a group of law students from UCLA started a project called the Cole Doctrine. Their goal was to push for new state laws requiring transparency in HOA land acquisitions. I didn't ask for any of it, but maybe that's why it mattered. Then one morning in late October, I got a call that caught me off guard. "Mr. Cole speaking. This is Sarah Chen. I don't mean to bother you, but some of the neighbors want to meet. About the community trust. Something wrong. Not wrong. Just, we have ideas." That weekend I drove down to Summit Crest, now officially renamed Cole Ridge Community. The homeowners meeting was held in the newly finished clubhouse. They'd rebuilt it themselves, volunteer weekends and all. When I walked in, everyone stood and clapped. I froze, embarrassed. "You don't need to do that," Sarah grinned. "We do. Because you didn't just give us land, you gave us our voices back." They'd voted to form a resident board to manage the trust teachers, mechanics, retirees, even a single mom named Julia who ran the neighborhood daycare. They wanted to turn the old HOA office into a community center and start a local reforestation project. "We're planting 50 trees every year," Sarah said, "one for each family that stayed." I smiled. "Then make it 96, one for every home." They cheered. It was the kind of sound that filled a room and a heart at the same time. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Sarah handed me a small box wrapped in brown paper. "It's from all of us." Inside was a hand-carved wooden plaque. Burned into it were the words, "This land stands free because one man refused to sell his silence. Cole Ridge Community, founded 2024. I didn't know what to say. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt tears that weren't angry. That night I returned to my cabin and set the plaque above the fireplace. The flames danced below it, casting soft light across the walls. For once the place didn't feel empty, it felt alive. The next morning Nadia called again. "You sitting down, should I be?" She laughed. "The DOJ just announced restitution. You're getting a portion of the seized assets from the Langford's account's $2.1 million. I almost dropped the phone. "What? No, I told you I don't. It's not optional," she said. "The money comes from forfeited gains. Legally, it's yours." I sighed. "Then let's use it right. Put it in the trust. Scholarships, infrastructure, environmental restoration." "I don't need it." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "You're either the dumbest or the best man I've ever met." "Probably both," I said. Winter came early that year. Snow draped the ridge like a new beginning. The families at Coal Ridge decorated their homes for the holidays, stringing lights from porch to porch. The trust funded a new playground. Kids built snowmen where bulldozers once parked. Sometimes I'd drive by in the evening watching the glow of windows across the valley. It was strange, peaceful, but still humming with the memory of everything we'd survived. On Christmas Eve, a truck pulled up outside my cabin. It was Torres. He stepped out carrying a small wrapped gift. "From the department," he said. "We figured you deserved something that wasn't a court summons for once." I opened it. Inside was a framed newspaper clipping "Engineer Wins Backland Teaches Nation a Lesson." Beneath the headline, Torres had signed his name and written, "For standing your ground with receipts." We shared a laugh, then silence. Snowflakes drifted down between us, glowing in the porch light. "You ever think about running for office?" he asked suddenly. "Office me, I barely survived an HOA." "Exactly," he said. "You've seen the worst of power and didn't let it corrupt you. That's rare." I smiled. "I'll leave politics to people who like shaking hands. I'm better at hammering fences." He chuckled. "Fair enough. Merry Christmas, Mason. Merry Christmas, Torres." After he left, I sat by the fire, listening to it crackle. The wind outside carried the faint laughter of families from down the ridge. And for the first time since that awful day I'd found bulldozers on my land, I finally felt the one thing that money court rulings and revenge could never buy peace. It wasn't loud or cinematic. It was quiet, steady, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you built something honest out of the ruins. Somewhere in the corner, my grandfather's old ledger sat open on the table. His handwriting, neat and stubborn, stared back at me. I took a pen and added one final line beneath the last entry, "Restored, not reclaimed." Then I closed the book, set it beside the fire, and let the crackle of burning logs echo through the cabin like applause from ghosts. By the time spring returned to the ridge, the snow had melted into silver ribbons that fed the creek again. The forest was coming back slowly, stubbornly, like it remembered how to breathe. The once bulldozed slopes were dotted with young pines, their needles trembling in the mountain wind. Sometimes when the sun hit just right, I could almost swear the land looked the way it did when Grandpa still walked it. A year had passed since the verdict, but the echoes of that courtroom still reached me. Every time I opened the mailbox, there was another letter from strangers, lawyers, farmers, veterans, widows, all telling me their own version of the same story. They tried to take what was mine, but your story made me fight back. I kept them all in a box under my desk. The lid barely closed now. One afternoon in April, I got an email from Patricia Hughes, the journalist who'd covered the trial. The subject line read, "1 year later, want to talk." I met her at a coffee shop in downtown Boulder, the same city where the Langfords once signed fake deeds like royalty. She looked the same as ever, sharp, kind eyes behind tired glasses, a recorder already in her hand. She smiled. "Mason, you ready for part 2 of your 15 minutes of fame?" I laughed. "If it helps someone else, sure. But I'd rather talk about the land than myself." "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." She clicked the recorder. "So tell me what's changed." I thought about it. Everything I said finally. The families at Coal Ridge built their first community center. The trust funded 5 scholarships. We're working with the state to restore the old forest. It's not perfect, but it's honest. And that's something. She nodded, jotting notes. "And you, what's next for you?" I shrugged. "I build fences, fix roofs, drink bad coffee. And once in a while I look at the deed and remember that some things are worth bleeding for." She smiled softly. "That line's going in the article." Before leaving, she said something that stuck with me. "You know, I cover disasters for a living. Corruption, greed, people breaking things for profit. But every so often, someone reminds me that decency still exists. You're that reminder." I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, "Guess Grandpa raised me right." 2 weeks later, the story aired, "The Man Who Beat the HOA and Built a Legacy Instead." It wasn't flashy. No drama music, no slow-motion courtroom footage. Just shots of families planting trees, kids laughing near the new playground, and me standing at the ridge with my old survey map. The final line Patricia narrated was simple. In a world where land can be stolen with paperwork, one man proved that integrity is still the strongest foundation you can build on. The segment went viral again, though this time the comments weren't angry, they were hopeful. A retired judge from Utah wrote that he planned to use the case as a teaching example in ethics seminars. A small-town mayor in Texas emailed asking how to start a similar community trust. And then out of nowhere came a call from a law school dean in Denver. "Mr. Cole, we'd like to establish an annual scholarship in your name," he said, "for students pursuing property or environmental law." I laughed. "I'm not a lawyer," he chuckled. "You didn't have to be. You taught half the country how property law actually works." So I agreed on one condition, that it be named after my grandfather instead. The Elias Cole Foundation for Land Integrity. By summer, the trust had expanded. The community hosted an annual festival, Founders Day, where families from all over Colorado came to celebrate. There were food stalls, local bands, and a little memorial corner, with Grandpa's photo and his favorite quote burned into a wooden sign. "Land doesn't belong to those who claim it. It belongs to those who care for it." At sunset, I stood near the makeshift stage while kids ran barefoot through the grass. Sarah Chen waved me over and handed me the microphone. "Mason," she said, "you started this. Say something." I froze for a second. Public speaking had never been my thing, but the expectant faces made me smile. I took a deep breath. When I first drove up here and saw houses where my forest used to be, I thought it was over, that the land was lost forever. But I was wrong. Because land isn't just dirt, it's memory. And memory doesn't die unless we let it. You all prove that. The crowd cheered. I held up my hand. So, here's to every family who fought for what's right. Here's to every neighbor who planted a tree instead of building a fence. And here's to my grandfather, whose words still echo louder than any gavel, "Don't let the bastards take what's yours." The applause rolled like thunder through the valley. Later that night, after the music faded and the kids had gone home, I walked to the edge of the ridge. The moonlight shimmered across the roofs below, no longer symbols of theft, but of survival. Nadia called just then. "You on the ridge again?" she asked, laughing. "Always," I said. "How's early retirement treating you?" "Boring as hell," she admitted. "But worth it. Oh, and you'll be happy to know the Langfords finally pled guilty. No trial. 22 years, each federal time. Graham flipped on his wife to get a reduced sentence, but it won't save either of them." I exhaled slowly. "So it's really over." "Yeah," she said. "It's over. You turned a legal nightmare into a legal landmark." I smiled. "Guess that means I can finally rest." "Just don't rest too long," she said. "The world still needs people like you." After we hung up, I stood there for a while listening to the wind whisper through the pines. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out steady, certain alive. A few weeks later, I got a letter postmarked from a federal facility in California. No return name, but I knew who it was before I even opened it. Inside, the handwriting was sharp, deliberate. "Mr. Cole, you won. You got everything you wanted. I hope it makes you feel righteous. But I'll say this. None of this would have happened if I'd believed for 1 second that people like you could win. I was wrong. Victoria." I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on the shelf next to Grandpa's old ledgers. Maybe someday I'd read it again, maybe not. But in that moment, it felt like closure, the last echo of arrogance fading into silence. That evening, I took a long walk through the forest trail that led down to the creek. The new trees whispered like children learning their first words. The water sparkled under the fading light. I crouched by the bank, ran my fingers through the cold stream, and whispered, "It's done, Grandpa." We kept it safe. Back at the cabin, I poured myself a small glass of whiskey and sat on the porch while the stars blinked awake. The night smelled like pine smoke and new beginnings. For once, I didn't think about courts or deeds or revenge. I thought about the 96 families laughing in their homes. I thought about the students who'd someday use that scholarship to defend someone else's land. I thought about how justice, real justice, isn't a verdict, it's a seed. And if you plant it right, it grows forever. So if you're listening out there somewhere and someone's trying to take what's yours, your land, your peace, your dignity, remember this: you don't need to fight loud. You just need to fight smart. Keep your records, keep your truth, keep your receipts. Because sooner or later, the truth always cashes out. And when it does, make it count. Mason Cole, Coal Ridge, Colorado. When life strips something from you, your home, your peace, your faith, it's easy to let anger consume you. But revenge burns fast. Justice builds slow. Mason's fight wasn't about ego, it was about legacy, and that's what made it timeless. He turned injustice into purpose, transformed stolen land into shared hope, and proved that one person's courage can outlast any empire of greed. The lesson, real strength, isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about rebuilding what they tried to break. So, if you've ever been wronged, don't give up. Stand tall, document everything, and let your integrity do the talking. Because the world doesn't need more rage, it needs more receipts.